Okay, so just a few brief words in closing. I won't say too much. I said a fair amount about closing kinds of ideas last night, so just another sadhu anumodana for being here, making the effort, and yeah, probably going through some rough bits, hopefully going through some beneficial times, joyful times, relaxing times, sharing the space, listening to teachings, and just communing with each other. It's a great thing. Just a few thoughts from the aspect of this being a monastic retreat, maybe a bit different from some retreats that you've been on before. Maybe not, but I remember Bhikkhu Bodhi making a point once at a monastic conference that it seems, and this was some time ago, so there's probably been some change in the period since then, but reflecting that a couple of aspects of the teaching, the Buddha's teaching, seem to have been maybe not lost, but not so much emphasized, kind of neglected to a certain extent as teachings have come to the West, particularly in the retreat format, lay retreat centers, retreat format. That two aspects of the practice sometimes get little mention in these circles. And so one of those being the practices around renunciation or simplicity, and then teachings on transcendence, actually the full and ultimate final goal of the practice being complete cessation, ending of suffering, and transcendence of all dukkha. That sometimes those teachings maybe don't get emphasized so much. So hopefully you picked up a little bit more of the flavor of those two aspects of the teaching during this retreat, simplicity and renunciation of following 8 precepts and restraint of the senses, those aspects of living a simpler life. And it's not something that is just relegated to a monastic form, to whatever extent you feel inclined in your daily life, to simplify. Life is so complicated these days, and it's just such a feeling of freedom when you don't have so much and don't have to look after so much, and have a simpler routine, maybe not so much stimulation. And less is more in that kind of a sense, and of course, I can't get away without saying my favorite phrase from an old song of freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. So the more we give up, the more we have. So to keep that in mind as you embark back to the return into the daily routines that we all have. And then also the transcendence, the fact that there is a full teaching of full liberation that we can aspire to. As I said in my talk the other night, as Ruth Dennison said, don't settle for just plain happiness. We are all capable of realizing the full completion of this path if we set that as our intention. So, and if, the formal aspects of the practice sometimes fall apart a little bit, everybody goes through periods where meditation sometimes seems difficult, and we kind of give up the ghost for a little while, hopefully come back to it all the time, but always, always, always keep the precepts at the heart of your practice. This is your foundation. Don't let that foundation crumble. At least, I remember Ajahn Amaro telling me once when I was a layman just coming into the practice, and he asked what I was, this was before I knew much about the path or the practice and the goal, and he asked what I was looking for, and I just said, well, I just want to be happy. And he said, well, if you want to be happy, follow the precepts and stick to them. That's your goal. That's your place of abiding for if you want to be happy. And I was surprised because I thought he was going to tell me I needed to meditate more twice a day, make a commitment to those kinds of aspects of the practice. And it was something that I hadn't ever thought about. Oh, keeping precepts can actually make me happy. So I've held that in my heart ever since. And I just would encourage people to keep that as your foundation for goodness. So pass this on to Ajahn.
Maybe if Ajahn Sudhiro just wants to say a few words of goodbye, or doesn't even have to be done.
Good idea.
Sounds good.
Well, yeah, it's been quite wonderful just to be able to share this space with all of you for the past week, and I just wanted to say Anumodana for being willing to continue to put forth the effort, day and night, and doing this kind of practice throughout the day, without many breaks, is something that's definitely not easy to do, even for people who live in a monastery. So I just want to say Anumodana, I delight in the goodness that you've brought, and the incredibly wholesome intentions that you've brought. Regardless of what we accomplished or didn't accomplish this week, I very much hope that whatever effort that we've invested in this week, that it will come to bear fruit for us in the future. And there's maybe it's uncertain, when or how that will bear fruit, but I very much have confidence that all of the effort that we've put forth this week, none of it is wasted, and I very much hope that all of us will, as a result of this kind of practice and continuing to be able to practice in this way in the future, I very much hope that it will bring all of us to a place of real happiness in this lifetime. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just a few words in closing before we're going to cut pieces of blessing cord and hand them out to everybody to keep as a reminder of this retreat. I believe it's the 33rd ever Thanksgiving retreat, because these actually started before Abhayagiri was founded, with Ajahn Amaro, and I think Lumpur Sumedho even led one or two of them, maybe. So this has been a big part of us, of our community, coming to America and becoming, and really putting down roots in America, as these Thanksgiving retreats. And yeah, to echo some of Ajahn Krudamo's reflections, just that a monastic retreat is something kind of unusual. We don't have necessarily a set format or a set technique that we're going to teach every time. We might just be talking from our experience and just some tips and tricks, some pro tips maybe in the practice, and because we're dedicating our lives to this. So we do, the monastics do have more time for reflection and for practice, and so we do these monastic retreats so that we can share some of that with all of you. And even the monastics have to go through their own trials and tribulations in the practice. And I think one of the benefits of these monastic retreats is that the lay community, you all get to take the 8 precepts and just temporarily join in with the monastic schedule, and that can help to give you a shot in the arm in terms of your practice and help you to reflect on Sangha Nusati, in order to remain encouraged and inspired in the practice. And so when we leave this retreat, all of us are going to go back to whatever situations that we're in, and we're just going to default back into whatever we're defaulting into. But doing a monastic retreat like this and keeping precepts, hopefully it shows us that there is some higher happiness that's possible, rather than just settling for mediocrity in our lives. There is some sort of happiness that comes through the practice that is possible. So recollecting the transcendent, Lumpur Viradamo there's 3 ajahns who just reached their 50th vasa this year. Lumpur Pasano, Lumpur Viradamo, Lumpur Tiradamo, they all reached their 50th vasa. And one thing that Lumpur Viradamo, also known as Lumpur V, he visited us last year, and I remember in a conversation with him, he said that one thing he finds important in his own practice is to recollect the transcendent at least once a day. So at least once a day, just recollecting Nibbana or recollecting the possibility of transcendence, not necessarily putting forth some sort of heroic effort or striving for it even, but just to recollect it, just to think of it as a possibility each day. And that. He said he finds that very, very important. And I can see for myself, I also find that very important to just recollect it at least once a day, ideally 2 or 3 times a day, but just that possibility of transcendence. And then that really keeps things in perspective and keeps us from running around too much, attending to things that maybe aren't as important as transcendence. It's not that we just turn our backs on the conditioned world completely, but we just remind ourselves of what's really important, and that there may be certain problems in our lives or certain difficulties, and we can, when we recollect transcendence, we actually can realize they're not actually that important. So also, a couple days ago, there was this kind of well-known Kruba Ajahn, a very old Longpor in Thailand who passed away. His name was Longpor Ha, and I think he was in the north. And he's also lovingly known as Longpor Dinosaur, and not just because he was almost 100 when he died, but he actually had that nickname because of a kind of a interesting story earlier in his life. And the reason I thought to recollect him was not because I want to tell you the story of how he got called Longpor Dinosaur, although I will tell you that because it is interesting, but that a teaching was shared with me. Somebody shared one of his teachings with me, and apparently he was somebody who, almost until the time when he died, he would go and sweep the monastery at night when everybody was asleep. He would go out and he would sweep the monastery. And somebody asked him, one of his students asked him, why do you do that? And so his last words apparently were when the monastery is clean, the mind is clean. So then those were like his last words, or some of his last words before he died. And I thought, well, that's very simple, and we can just remember little teachings like that to help ourselves. So that idea of just keeping things clean, keeping things simple, keeping things neat and orderly. The mind is clean. Oh yeah, and then the second part, that's actually, he did have a second part to that. He said, and then when the mind is clean, then you don't fall to hell. That's it. He said, when the monastery is clean, the mind is clean. When the mind is clean, you don't fall to hell. So that's it's quite apt. And so he was a Longpor Dinosaur was a Tudong monk, and he was going Tudong in the north. This would have been probably in the 1950s or something. And it was in a very, very remote area in Chiang Mai, I believe. And he set up his glot, his monk's umbrella tent, and he was practicing meditation in this very remote area, kind of just in the mountains, really far away from any villages. And in one of his meditation sessions, kind of beginning, he stayed in this area maybe for a few days or a week, but at the beginning of his time there, when he was meditating, his mind entered samadhi, and he had a vision. He had a nimitta of a brontosaurus. And this brontosaurus walked up to him, and it paid respects to him, and then said, welcome. You're welcome to stay here as long as you like. And then it disappeared. And so he just kind of wondered at this, and he went about his practice, went about his tudong, and then much later on, he was chatting with a layman, and he mentioned this vision, how it was very unusual that he saw this huge dinosaur in his vision. And they figured out where it was, and they actually did a dig there, and they actually found a skeleton of a brontosaurus, a dinosaur skeleton there, and it became a kind of a big find. So then, ever since then, he was known as Longpor Dinosaur. so that's they found large fossils there, and so it's kind of very interesting. And he passed away a couple of days ago. But with teachings like that, with clean monastery, clean mind, then and just think a lot of these meditation masters, the way they teach is in a very, very light-hearted way, and they're not teaching us in a very heavy way or kind of berating us. We might hear stories of Ajahn Mun being very, very strict with his disciples, but then one of his students actually said, well, what he remembers most about Ajahn Mun was his sense of humor. And so a lot of the times, the heavy-heartedness that we experience in the practice is something that we're placing on ourselves, and we might project and think it's being placed on us by our teachers or by some other outside force, but it's actually, we're placing it on ourselves. So to remember those qualities I mentioned in the very beginning of the retreat, upekkha, equanimity is upekkha, and then putting space around things. So a quality to be developed is upekkha, and then a skill to be trained in is that ability to put space around things and just to be very forgiving with ourselves and to develop a sense of lightheartedness, a sense that everything's okay. And it's like Ajahn Jayasaro mentioned one time. He said, I challenge anybody to find any situation that you can't practice in if you're keeping the precepts. He said, if you're not keeping the precepts, then there'll be situations where you maybe aren't able to practice, but as long as you're keeping the 5 precepts, then I challenge you to find any situation where you can't be cultivating, where you can't be developing yourself. So Ajahn Jayasaro has this challenge that is his precept challenge, Lumpur Jaya's precept challenge, that try to find any situation that you can't practice in if you're keeping the precepts. And we'll find that more often than not, there is some way we can cultivate, some way we can reflect on things throughout the day, as long as we're keeping the precepts, and then we will be able to move in the right direction. We will be able to develop. So with that, I would like to wish everybody well as you go on your way.